Hey everyone, welcome to this tutorial on Windows services where we'll create a Windows service using C# and then be able to move files around from one folder to another folder using a Windows service. So just before we get started, I just want to say if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so now and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss any of these tutorials or any other videos going forward. So what we're going to be doing here in this tutorial is we're going to be using a library called topshelf, which helps us actually build out our Windows service. If you use traditional methods of building Windows services, you can do that as well. The only thing is that it's extremely difficult to test and debug. And the reason for that is because it doesn't have any interface which you can really see data. So you'd most of the time have to log things to files just to debug issues, etc. With topshelf, we can run it as a console application and we can do console.writelines to actually output some data, whatever we need to do. We can step through it with the debug functionality in Visual Studio and all sorts of things to just make our lives a little easier. Again, with regular services in Visual Studio, you'll still be able to do this, but you'll have to switch between console and regular service applications to try and simulate this. Where topshelf will just do all of this out of the box and also handle a whole bunch of other little bits of functionality like installing the service and deploying it, etc. Where regular functionality for Windows services in Visual Studio do not have that facility, and you'll have to use something like SVC or whatever to actually install your Windows service, which is a little bit more difficult to do, but also possible. But let's rather use topshelf to make our lives easier. The first thing we need to do is install topshelf, and I just want to explain quickly. I just created a regular little project here, and the project is a new project. And I just chose a console app and its .NET framework, and I just called it test service 2, and you could just do the same and then you'll be able to follow along. That's just basically the regular project, which is just the static void main and a program.cs file, and then just the usual imports that we are bringing into the application. So the first thing we want to do before we get started is to install topshelf. So to do that, we'll go over to tools over here and NuGet package manager, and then you'll go to package manager console, and then down here you'll just type install dash package and you'll just say topshelf. So I've already done this and you can just run it, and it's going to go and install topshelf and import it as a reference into your project over here, and then you can start using it. So the first thing we're going to do here is just do a couple of things. We need to first create a service class. I'll just right click over here and I'll create a new class. I'll add a class here and I'm going to call it test service 2, like that. And then we need to basically bring in a few things. So we're going to use a timer to try and determine when to run the service on a timed interval. So we'll just go ahead and let's get rid of these packages because we're not going to be using them. And I'm just going to bring in 2 packages. One is system.timers. And I'm going to bring in system.io. And we're going to use IO to read directories and all those sorts of things, and then we can move files around, etc. So in our test service class, we just need to define a timer. So we'll just make it a read-only timer, and so we have class type timer, and we'll just make the variable underscore timer. Then in the constructor, we'll just go ahead and initialize the timer. So it'll be timer equals new timer, and we'll just set this to 2000, which is going to be 2 seconds. And then we'll also set the auto reset property so that it auto resets after the time is elapsed. And we need to actually tell it which function we need to use when we do elapsed time so that we can execute something. every time the time runs out. So for this, we'll do timer.elapsed, and we'll go plus equals, and then we'll just put in any function or method name that we want to use. So I'll just call this execute service, like that. And you don't need the brackets, you need to give it the function name. So now what we'll do is we'll just declare this as a private void execute service, and we need to give it some injectors like sender, and we need to give it an elapsed event args. So we'll just do EV for this. And then basically what we're going to do now is we're actually going to just read a directory, which we'll just call in, and we'll create that at a later stage. But for now, we'll just read some files from there and then move files across and delete the files from in. So very simply, we'll just go ahead and just do a string array, and it's going to be called files. And we'll just go ahead and do system.io.directory.get files, and at, so that we don't have any errors, and then we'll look in the in folder for any files that are placed in there. Then we'll just go ahead and just loop over these files. So we'll say string file path in files. So remember, this is going to return the full path of this files in here. We're going to have to manipulate it a little bit to get the file name. So the file name, we'll do a string equals file name, and we'll basically, string file name is equal to path.get file name. So this will just get the actual file name and not the path. And then we'll pass in file path over here. And then basically we'll just do a copy. So we'll do system.io.file.copy. And then basically we'll take the in folder, and we'll take the file name, and we'll copy it to the out folder, and we'll call it the same file name, just so that it's basically a copy or a cut and paste. And then we'll simply just delete the file out of the in folder. So that's file.delete, and it's at in/plus file name. So that will basically then copy whatever is in to out, and then delete what was in the in folder in the first place. Now what we need to do is manage how we actually stop and start our timer. So we are going to define just a couple of extra methods here. So one, we'll just create a public void start over here, and that'll basically take the timer and just start. That's easier for us to then access it from the program CS file. So void stop and timer.stop. And then the very next thing we need to do is just basically go ahead and just handle the timer now inside of here. So we'll do something like try, and we'll just do timer.stop. Basically, if it's in the middle of a processing thread, it needs to try and stop it. Otherwise, there is going to be an exception. So we're just basically handling that exception. So then we'll have a catch for our exception, and we'll just call this E for now. And we'll just go ahead and just print something to the console. And we'll just say something went wrong. And we'll put in e.message. So basically we'll just get the message of that, and then finally, when we are all done and it has stopped, we can now restart the timer. So we'll start timer over here. Alright, so that's basically our test service. That's how we construct it, and then within our program we'll then go and register this service. So we'll go over to program CS, and then we'll just start off with some basic stuff. Like first we need to bring in topshelf. So we'll say using topshelf, and now we can actually start registering. So what we'll do is we'll put this all in a try catch block, so that if we do have any errors, we get them. So we don't really want our service to just break out and have issues and not do anything. So we'll just do console.writeLine and e.message like this, so that we have some form of detail if something goes wrong. We're going to go ahead and create a run, basically with a host factory, so that we can register the service and set it up and give it various different descriptions, etc., so that we can recognize it within our Windows system. So here's what we're going to do. We're first going to just go ahead and just declare a code, so that when we get an error code back, we know what error it is. And then host factory dot run, and then we'll have a lambda function over here, which will then just close off. So just keep that simple, and then we'll go ahead and register the service. So we'll just do x.service, and we'll then pass in our template for our test service 2, and then we're going to go into another lambda function, and we'll just do s. And now we'll go ahead and just set up some of the different things. So first we need to tell our service how it gets constructed. We need to then pass it a class. So we'll just go s.construct using, and it will basically take a lambda function, which then requires us to just say new test service 2, so it knows which class to use to construct with. And something has gone wrong here. Let's just fix that. Visual Studio Code is, or Visual Studio is being strange. Let's put this here, and let's see if we can put that semicolon there. No. Okay, we'll somehow get past that. For now, I'm just going to copy this and paste it. Just going to do something very similar here. I'm going to now just say when started, what do we do? So this is where this method now came in, start and stop. So now we can start and stop. So we'll now say the service dot start, service dot start, and then over here it's going to be service dot stop. And we'll have service over here. It all needs to be service. The Studio is just making it very difficult right now to type. And then when stopped is this thing that we register. Let's see if we can now. Okay, so we just need to put in the curly braces so that it's that anonymous function, and then we can put the semicolons over here. There we go. And now it's not giving us any issues. Now we need to basically define what the naming is of the service and so on. So here we'll go ahead and we'll just say xrun as a local system. So there's different types. So it can run as a local service, network service, etc. Run as local system usually has high enough privileges to do whatever you need. So just use that. So then the next thing is we can define the service name. So set service name, and we'll just call this test service 2. So you can call this whatever you like. It's basically just the internal naming for Windows itself. So this is what it will call it within the services application or context within Windows. And then we basically need to set a display name, and this will just call this or test service 2 like that. So it's a bit more of a descriptive name, and then there's an actual description which you can set. So this just makes it easier when system administrators come along and they look at services and they're trying to stop some services, that they don't actually stop something that's important. So I'll just say something like, this is an important service, don't stop. Something like that, just to give them a little bit more detail as to what the service is about. Then basically we'll just go ahead and we'll just do the catch, which is fine, that's all good, and then we can now actually just run this and see what it looks like. So I'm going to first just build this as a release. So I'll build release like that, and then let's see if everything works. It does. And I'm going to actually go and run this for us. And what we need to do is we need to go ahead and create some folders. So I'm going to go into the bin release, and I'm going to bring that over here so you can see what it is. And we need to go ahead and create a new folder called in and a new folder called out, like this. And now what we can do is we can run it as a regular Windows or console application. And now watch what happens when we actually go and create a file in here. So let's just create a new text file, and let's call it test1. And it's actually already deleted it. So let's stop this service, and we'll go ahead and just go in here, create a file, folder, folder, file, new text document, test1, and then we go back and run this service, and we go back into in, and you'll see it's gone. And then if you go to out, it's created the first file we created and this file. So that's how it will transfer files for us. So now what we want to do next is actually go ahead and install this as a service. So to do that, we need some elevated privileges. So I'm just going to grab this so that we know where the project is, or the build release is. And then we want to go over to a PowerShell, that, and we want to run it with elevated privileges. So as administrator, just say yes, and then we'll cd into that folder like this. And if we do an ls, we can see that we have test service 2. So we'll just run test service 2 like this, and we'll just go ahead and say install, and you'll see that it does a whole bunch of things like success, etc, 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 and it will then create a service for us. So we can go down all the way to basically the test service, and I'll show it to you in a second. I just want to skip over some of my confidential services, and if we go over here and just see that there's our test service, it's set to automatic, and it has our description, and it should now be running. So it's not running yet. We'll just go start and start it up, and you'll see it's now running. Now when we actually go and modify some files now, and this is not with that other thing running now, so we could just go ahead and just create this text document there, and you'll see it immediately disappears and goes into the out folder. So that's because we have now started the service, and now let's stop it. I want to show you how to actually uninstall this thing. So once it's stopped like this and it's automatic, and you go to your PowerShell and you want to now uninstall this, you could do this. But the issue is that it's now going to sort of put it in suspension, and then the next time you need to, or basically if you want to remove it, you won't be able to. You'll require a reboot. There are some methods I've seen online of how you can actually remove the service, but none of them have worked for me so far. What I would say is rather go ahead and disable the service first if you want to uninstall. So this is the procedure I follow. So you go in here, and then you go down to disabled and make sure it's stopped. And then if you go ahead and uninstall now, you will see that it will actually uninstall. So I hit enter and uninstall beginning, and it says was successfully removed from your system. And then if we refresh over here, you'll see that it is no longer installed. So that's how you can uninstall and install these services. So guys, that's everything that I wanted to cover in this video. So if you liked it, please like below. If you have questions, please leave some comments. And thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.